Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.
Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
Big warm welcome to everyone and a huge thank you for joining us for the official launch of the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Welcome to episode 1. Our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, fantasy and picture book writer, reader, and your co-founder of Australian Book Lovers.
And I am Darren Cousinco, sci-fi and horror author, reader, and one of your hosts and co-founder of the Australian Book Lovers. Now, Veronica, can you believe the time has finally come and here we are recording our first official podcast for Australian Book Lovers. This is amazing.
It is amazing and it is a bit hard to believe. But we can thank COVID, I guess, is a little bit because not only have we had a little bit more time than normal, but the focus has been on, what we've been doing. And we've written a book together.
Well, this is right. Many of our readers, should I say, listeners probably weren't aware that we actually co-authored a book last year. And it was during that process that the seeds of Australian Book Lovers really came about. And it's been a journey that has kind of just steamrolled and gotten bigger and bigger as the things have moved along. And here we are, 2021. The website is live. Here we are recording our first official podcast, and fingers crossed the book we wrote together will be in the library very soon.
Yes, if we can find some time to do that editing, because we have got some fabulous feedback from some of our beta readers. And I also wanted to mention that, for me, the inspiration to, get this conversation really going with you was with the support of a couple of groups on Twitter. There's a great writing community on Twitter.
There is,
and
yes.
Yeah, there's a really good group that I am up at the crack of dawn with, the 6 a.m. Oz Writers Group, started by Emily Rayburn. It was her idea, and a few of us have got together and sort of, there's a core group and plus a few people that go in and out depending on whether they can get up in the morning. But again, it's that kind of support and that understanding of the Australian context that really works. The other group is the Oz Writes Group, which was started by a writer called Rebecca Langham and also supported now by Kevin Clear. And they put out a monthly set of prompts every 2 days. People talk about their writing or what they're reading, or, for example, today is, what books did you read at school? So it can be, fun stuff, serious stuff, process stuff. And it is just making that community. And that's really what I have been just overwhelmed with, the number of people who've jumped in to Australian Book Lovers.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better. It has been absolutely overwhelming. And I think at the last count, we've got over 160 titles. And I think you mentioned nearly 116 or so authors.
Yes.
Which is just unbelievable. And especially when you're talking about the support out there and the different author groups and whatnot on Twitter and even on Facebook. But I think, as a writer, I'm sure you'll agree that you spend so much time sitting by yourself, tapping away at that keyboard. And one of the really amazing things about Australian Book Lovers is that feedback and the opportunity that it's opened up for myself and yourself to actually chat with other authors and get other people's points of view. And talk about a craft that we both love so much and cherish so much. Yeah. But it can be quite lonely at the keyboard and frustrating when it comes to that dreaded thing called editing, of course.
Yes.
Which I know we have to do sooner or later for the book.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there's a couple of words that I wanted to share with the group. And I think the people that are listening will fall into one or both of these groups. So a book lover, which, you know, I think that was your idea that we call it book lovers, which was brilliant. A book lover is a bibliophile, or in fact a bookworm, but a word lover is a logophile or word nerd. So hopefully there are lots of bookworms and word nerds listening, and you will get something from this podcast.
Yes, well, I'm not sure if I'd introduce myself as a, what is that, logophile?
A logophile, yes, it's a word lover.
I'll definitely identify myself as a word lover, but in a party setting, I might avoid the
maybe not.
but very interesting word.
Very good.
Now, obviously, Australian Book Lovers is quite new, and the website's only been live for a couple of weeks. But as you said, we've had amazing support from the community. I think we've got over 400 subscribers, so it's 400 passionate book lovers out there, and it's growing every day. And I'm really looking forward to seeing our community of readers and writers grow. As we're going to do our best to make 2021 a truly special year. But speaking of the year ahead, Veronica, what literary goals have you got? You got to say what you set your sights for 2021. Because that's what it's all about.
And being a coach in my other life, I know the importance of goals. And now you're going to have me recorded for posterity, so I'll have to be accountable and get on with it. So I am currently editing the sequel of my fantasy series, and this is Soul Staff. It's a dystopian fantasy based partly in Melbourne in about the 300 or 400 years into the future. So I have about 6 chapters to go on a structural edit after a fantastic course that I did with Dr. Kate Forsyth, and it's called The Story Doctor. If anybody's looking for it, highly recommend that one. So one goal is to get that edited and published this year, and surely it's only February now. I could do that. And
I think very achievable.
You reckon?
Yeah.
For me also, there's but the third of my children's picture books. I have written the script, and I'm just waiting for my fabulous illustrator, Cassie Strackett. Yes, she is related, to do the illustrations for me. So that is Chickabella Shapes Up, and that will be a third book in the Adventures of Chickabella series. And of course, what I'm absolutely hoping for is that a certain South Australian writer, Darren Kassenkow, and I will be able to get not only our first adventure, sort of supernatural, slightly spooky adventure series started with the first book, but that we actually get the second book written and well on the way as well. So I think that's enough goals, don't you?
I think there's a few good ones in there, and definitely once we get that book edited, it's going to be an amazing project to jump back on board, because obviously before writing that book with you, I'd never written with an author before, and it was such a fascinating approach to writing and editing each other's works and trying to find the voice of the characters that obviously you created your character, I created my character, and they come together. So that was a really good shot in the arm as far as picking up my word skills and learning to write a little bit differently, and I'll go outside the comfort zone, I guess you could say, but it was super fun, which is the main thing. So I can't wait for it to come out, and I'm sure we'll be doing a little bit of spruiking once it does too.
Oh, look, absolutely. So of course, now that you've pinned me down to your goals, I need to hear, what are you hoping to nail for this year? What are your literary goals?
Well, very similar to yours. As you're probably aware, I've been working on a sequel to the Halysigenia project. So this one is titled Godless. So almost at its finishing stage. There's a little bit more work to do. Has been put somewhat on the back burner while putting together Australian Book Lovers. But having talked with a lot of authors recently, now that the website's up and things are slowly getting momentum, I can feel that energy coming back, and the muse is reinvigorated. So looking forward to jumping in, getting that sequel done, obviously editing our book and getting that out, and from there we'll just see what happens, because I suspect and hope that the website turns into something really fantastic and something that can benefit a lot of people. So I'm looking forward to head down, bum up, and working really hard to make the website grow and hopefully get all of our authors that are on the website some really good purchases and maybe some sales that exceeds the last couple of years. That is definitely the goal for 2021.
Fantastic. And next time, I know we've talked about in episode 2, we're just going to gather some stats about the Australian publishing industry. So hopefully we'll have some figures and bits and pieces to share with readers and authors.
I'll be looking forward to that, because it's not something I've had delved into quite a bit. It's one thing to sit there writing and thinking about all different plot points and editing, but as far as the state of the Australian publishing industry and what people are reading, what sort of sales are getting, it's going to be a fascinating insight, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Excellent.
So I appreciate you looking into it for me.
No worries. I do love a few statistics. I can't help myself. That's the project management person in me. I like to know the data. But anyway, I'm going to ask one more question. So what have you been reading lately?
Wow. Actually, I was given a book, I think it's called The Harry Hole. I think it's a Swiss or Finnish author, I'm not too sure, but I started reading that a little bit. But to be honest, most of my reading recently has been nonfiction and doing research for the sequel, which is when I can sit down and read now.
Very good.
So I'm looking, but that was one of the really interesting things about getting the book submissions for the website. It was a real wake up and a reminder of all these fantastic titles that are out there by Australian authors. Obviously I'm a horror lover, and it's been a while since I sat down with a good horror book. I love my science fiction. I love my thrillers. Obviously I love my non-fiction as well. But it's looking at all these titles. Once things settle down a little bit and we can move forward and find a little bit of time to read, I'm going to be jumping all over the library. I've got quite a few books on there that I'm already looking at. I know one of them, Soul Survivor, with cover art is something that haunts you each time
it
you look at it.
It haunts me whenever I see it, yes. If anybody's wondering, I'm not going to describe it. Just hop on the Australian Book Club's website, go to horror and scroll down. I am sure you will know which cover I'm talking about.
Most definitely. There's no missing a koala with those sorts of teeth. So I think that'll be my first read. It does sound fun, but so many books to enjoy. So that is definitely also one of the goals for 2021, is to get some serious reading time back and not just research. So it's going to be awesome. It's going to be fun.
I have to admit that my reading pile has included a lot of the books that have come onto the website, because I am a sucker for a great story. The book that I've just finished reading is Stealing Time by Rebecca Bowyer. She's one of our authors. That's her second book. I also read her first book called Maternal Instinct. Now, Rebecca's a Melbourne writer, and what I love about reading Australian-based stories is that it just feels so comfortable. The language is familiar. I think Rebecca's it sounds like she's worked in government, because, the government dystopian futures that she's describing, I've done some work in government. It's like, oh, that's scarily, like, yes, or not good. It's like the Rob Sitch comedy series that, about the Olympics and that. It's like, so it's so terrible that it's not funny, but even though it's hilarious. So, yeah, Stealing Time is fantastic. In the book, I'll just give you one little hint. When you get to 65, you are involuntarily, in inverted commas, provided with a poison through the spine, and that's it, you're out. So older persons have no place in Australia in this dystopian future. And given that I'm 60, that's a little too close to the comfort. I've started to think, right, well, what would I do if I only had 5 years left? So I love that they challenge today's governments. I love that, Australian books have that irreverent sense of humour, and there's so many fantastic books out there. And yes, I must admit that I have already bought a few, and probably will buy some more.
Well, that's what it's all about, but I'll be definitely buy some. But yeah, the idea of getting voluntarily terminated at 65, that's not quite the future I'd have wishing for myself. But there's something about dystopia. Obviously I'm a dystopian author, and I would have thought that dystopian themes wouldn't be so popular at the moment, considering in a sense we've been living through dystopia for the last 12 months. But from the conversations I've had and from a lot of the media and TV and movies and whatnot, it seems like a dystopian isn't going anywhere, and it may be becoming a bit more popular than normal, which is the opposite of what I thought would happen when we're actually living in a dystopian time.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the information that I've been following up about what are Australians reading at the moment, particularly sort of during COVID, is that what was described as that there's a lot of people reading escapist fiction, and I think probably dystopian worlds and sci-fi and fantasy and those kind of things come in there.
You would think so, yeah.
Yeah, there's also a lot of self-help. And children's book, particularly middle grade, and look, certainly in Australia, I think that's absolutely true because, we were in Victoria, but, especially in lockdown for a long time, there's a lot of homeschooling going on. So you can see parents reaching for the book platforms to get anything to keep kids occupied and educated and entertained.
Well, I'm wondering, obviously nobody likes COVID-19, no one likes the lockdowns, and fingers crossed we can all emerge as a race from this and have bigger and brighter future. But do you think perhaps the situation of COVID-19 and spending a lot more time at home, do you think it's reinvigorating people's love of books? Because at some point there must be some sort of saturation point of Netflix and Amazon and constantly watching. And I'm just wondering, and it'd be interesting to find out what, in the next episode when we talk about, or when you talk about some of the industry numbers and information, but I'm wondering if the love of books is coming back. Not that it's ever gone anywhere.
No, not for me.
But no, it's never gone for me. But at some point, are people putting the remote down and finally picking up books again that maybe haven't read a book for a long time? It'd be interesting to know.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I will keep chasing up the stats and see what I can find.
Now, Veronica, you mentioned obviously you've read quite a few of the books from the library, and moving forward, one of the features of the Australian Book Lovers podcast, will be the ability for book lovers out there to send in their audio book reviews.
Yes.
So now, if you can just record it with your phone or with your computer. If you're not comfortable recording your own voice, me, myself, I'm not very comfortable. This is all very new to me. I'm dreading listening to my own voice, but you can absolutely email in a review and we'll happily read it out for you. And I do understand at the end of the show, we've got a couple of book reviews from yourself, which is going to kick things off. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Beautiful. Okay.
Now, one of the big features, obviously, of our podcast is author interviews. And before I continue, to any listeners out there that heard a meow, I do have a very fat and needy cat that may come in. His name's Bobby, so he may be joining quite a few of these podcasts.
And he's also a little bit famous, Darren. He is in the Hallucigenia project.
This is true, yes. He's enjoyed a bit of a transformation through the series, through book 1 and 2. So I'm looking forward to that. But if anyone does have a copy of the Hallucigenia project, you'll actually find Bobby at the very back page, and I think it's a pretty funny photo. Nonetheless, he's coming
special
to
mention
now. So there we go. Bobby's part of the podcast. But as we were saying, one of the real important things about the Australian Book Lovers podcast is author interviews. And both of us, we've been blessed to already had the opportunity to chat with quite a few authors and some fantastic guests. But I understand for our very first podcast, you've got a very special author interview installed for us.
Look, absolutely. And I was so thrilled that we could speak with Gary Lonesborough. So Gary is a Yuin man who grew up on the far sort of south coast of New South Wales as part of a large and proud Aboriginal family. He admits to being a massive Kylie Minogue and North Queensland Cowboys fan. So
one of these things is not like the other, but
no, that's right. And I think he just presented with us such a beautiful, it was his first book called The Boy from the Mish. And we had a fantastic chat. And yeah, I'll be really happy to share with you our talk. So I'm Veronica Strachan, and I'm your host for today's interview. And I am absolutely delighted, a little bit on tenterhooks because we're running a bit late. So very happy to have with me today Gary Lonesborough. So Gary is a Yuin man who grew up on the far south coast of New South Wales as part of a large and proud Aboriginal family. Growing up a massive Kylie Minogue fan and also North Queensland Cowboys. We won't talk about, AFL down here. Gary was always writing as a child and continued his creative journey when he moved to Sydney to study at film school. Gary has experience working in Aboriginal health, the disability sector, including experience working in the youth justice system, and the film industry. He was Bega Valley Shire Council Young Citizen of the Year, won the Patrick White Young Indigenous Writers Award, and has received a Copyright Agency First Nations Fellowship. And The Boy from the Mish, which is the book we're talking about today, is Gary's debut YA novel. So, welcome, Gary.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Does it feel, you've mentioned that you've had a couple of these interviews under your belt now, so do you feel like you're in the swing and you're ready to have a good chat about your book?
Yeah, I've gotten a bit of practice at, talking about the story and what it's about. Yeah, giving answers to, the usual
The
questions. So,
usual, yeah.
yeah, I'm getting more confident, I think.
Good, good. All right, well,
Yeah, I'm also really enjoying it.
good. All right. Perhaps we could start then with telling people, because I have been really lucky enough to have an advanced reader copy of the book, and I've read it and marked it and done lots of bits and pieces to it. But for those of you who haven't read it, could you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, so the boy from the Mish is about a 17-year-old Aboriginal boy named Jackson. It's just about him growing up in a small Aboriginal village on the south coast of New South Wales, and it's just at a point in his life where he's experiencing a lot of change and also growing a lot as a person. And it's also at a point in his life where he's falling in love for the first time and coming to terms with his sexuality, learning to accept who he is, and yeah, finding his place in his world in his own community. And yeah, just growing a bit of confidence in himself.
Finding his way. All right. So, Gary, when did you decide, given that you've had so many other things under your belt, you've got all these fabulous skills, so when did you decide that writing was the next thing to go?
Oh, well, I've been writing ever since I was little.
Okay.
So, 6 or 7 would cut up pieces of A4 paper and staple them together to make little books.
Fantastic.
So my first book series was about a guy named Mr. Wagon. I don't remember anything about him or what his stories were or
Yeah.
anything like that. Yeah, it's very vague now to think of it.
Mm.
But yeah, I was always writing through school. So yeah, it was probably a little period in high school where I stopped sort of, more other things became more important, like, being a teenager.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess, going into film school straight out of high school, I was always doing a lot of writing. So I was writing short film scripts.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it wasn't until I read this book called The Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. And it was it's a great teen queer love story. And it sort of clicked in my head that I hadn't read anything like that was targeted at Aboriginal people or, queer Aboriginal teens. So I just sort of got the idea from a short film script that I'd already written, which was similar but very different. And yeah, just started writing, and I finished the first draft in about a month, and
Wow. That's fantastic.
continued to work on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the story sort of just came out of me, and yeah, it was really what inspired me was the lack of those books that have those voices or those stories about the Aboriginal coming of age experience, and also about the queer Aboriginal coming of age stories. So yeah, that's what inspired me to write it.
Tell me a little bit about your writing process then. If it poured out in a month, did you have a month to spare, or did you get up at the crack of dawn, or where did you fit it in with all the things you were doing?
Yeah, so I was writing part-time. I was working part-time,
right, okay.
At that time. So I would write pretty much all of my days off, and well into the nights as well. On the days that I was working, I used to find that I was most creative around midnight when I was writing that book. So yeah, it was a lot of sleepless nights, but it was also a hot summer, so it was a December to January sort of period. So yeah, I'm just sort of at my desk writing and sweating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
literally putting the sweat into it. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a time where I was working part-time, and I had there's more hours in the day that I could devote to that. And yeah, like since I started working full-time, I've continued to write late at night and really cherish weekends. Yeah, that's sort of how it happened around that time.
Yeah. Okay. And what happens from there? So you've got a month that's poured out, you've got that first draft, and then what do you do with it?
Yeah, I let it sit for maybe about a month, and then read over it, and worked on editing for a while, and maybe 6 months later, I was pretty ambitious. So I decided to start sending it out, maybe 6 months after I finished the first draft. At that point, I sort of looked at it differently. So I originally wrote the book from Thomas's perspective.
Yep.
Thomas was a very different character then.
Okay.
And yeah, so it was sort of a, you know, a going away on holiday romance rather than
Yeah.
what it is now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I sort of started getting rejections and started writing the book from Jackson's perspective, and I found that it really just, you know, changed the whole story. It changed the whole spirit of the story. Jackson was a much more interesting character, it turned out.
Who
You
knew?
know, his voice was more interesting,
Yeah.
and yeah, one of those rejections I got was from Alan and Unwin, and I just sort of asked them if they wanted to read the new version, and they said yes. So
Yep.
yeah, and then there was a lot of waiting after that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm finding in the publishing world, it's a lot of waiting and hoping.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was you know, I was writing it from a different perspective after you know, about a 6-month period. That really brought the story to life, and yeah, and after that, all the other elements of Jackson's world came together as well.
Yeah. Pretty brave to take that feedback and go, okay, well, it's not working. I'm going to completely write it from another character. Great skills.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's one of the things I think I'm really good at is you know, taking on feedback and being willing to try things if someone makes a suggestion rather than dismiss them altogether. And yeah, so you know, starting to write the story from Jackson's perspective wasn't straight away that I realized, but it was at some point during the writing that I realized that it was a much better story. So yeah, I'm definitely good at self-editing, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's also one of the fun parts of it, is that you get to edit yourself, and
Yeah.
that's where the book really takes shape. And yeah, that's where I had the most fun with the story, was you know, rewriting it and trying to make it work and bringing in all those other scenes and elements, and yeah, just bringing the story to life.
It certainly felt like real life. I could see the coastal village. I could see the beach and the rocks and the shops and the pub. Fantastic. The descriptions were just painted beautifully, not totally filled in like some people like to tell you, what color the grains of sand are. But, for me, your writing was really evocative enough that I like as a reader to be able to fill in some bits myself and, relate it to my own experience of, beach or coast or whatever. So no, that was fantastic.
Yeah, that was one of my goals, was to not, over describe things.
Yeah.
As a reader myself, I like to fill in those blanks myself. So
Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to paint enough of a picture that, you knew where you were and what was happening. But yeah, leave enough of those blank spaces for the reader to fill in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. So, an own voices story. So this is a little bit one of the books that you would like to have read, like to have seen more of yourself in stories as you were growing up, as you were, going through that adolescence yourself.
Yes. So yeah, I grew up on the South Coast in a small country town. Yeah, and I did deal with a lot of shame and those sort of issues of fear and all that through my teen years. And yeah, I'd like to think that it would have really helped reading a book like this, that had a gay Aboriginal character and, that was going through the same sort of things I was going through. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that, led to having that shame within myself, was that there wasn't any books about Aboriginal queer teens, and, there wasn't anything like no movies, no TV shows.
Yeah.
So there wasn't anything to sort of reflect myself off, and yeah, and my own voice didn't really feel like it mattered because it wasn't out there. Yeah, I think it's really important. A lot's changed since I left school, but that was only 8 years ago.
Feels like a lifetime.
But yeah, a lot has changed. But yeah, it was that was definitely one of the biggest issues for me growing up, was that there weren't these stories out there. There was nothing that I could see myself in and understand, and know in my heart that there's someone out there that knows exactly what I'm going through.
Yeah.
Knows how I'm feeling and has been through this before, and yeah, I think that's really important for teens, especially, is to be able to see themselves reflected in the world they're about to jump into.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there was a message, I guess, if you had a young gay Aboriginal person in front of you, what message would you like them to have? that you didn't have, I guess, and that you feel like the book is kind of, hitting some of those spots for them?
Yeah, I would just say to them, you're not alone.
Yeah.
There are gay Aboriginal teens out there. There are gay Aboriginal people out there. You do have a voice. There will be more books, hopefully, that reflect who you are, and characters that show parts of who you are in the world. But yeah, you're not alone. It's a scary, scary thing for a lot of people. Not so much for other people, but yeah, I think that's the main thing, is that you're not alone. What you're feeling is valid, and other people have felt it. And yeah, just be comfortable with who you are. There's only one of you. I think I think most people do something great with their lives, and you shouldn't be any different just because you're queer or you're Indigenous. Or yeah, ultimately, I hope you take inspiration from the book, just to know that you exist, and we hear you, we see you.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, I guess, any secrets that you've got in there. Do you name any of the characters after any friends or enemies? That's always the threat with writers, isn't it? Don't be mean to me, I'll kill you off in a story. So how close are some of those characters?
Okay. There's definitely a few of the, if you've read the book, you'll note that there's some racist characters in there, and
yes,
typical country racism. But yeah, those people are definitely inspired by us. Some people I knew, some people I went to school with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the most part, most of the characters are just, combinations of people I knew or people I've come across. Jackson's mum was definitely inspired by my own mother. So she passed away a few years ago, and she was definitely that very strong, sort of, proud Aboriginal woman that Jackson's mum is, who really cares about her children, and yeah, so that's pretty much it. The Auntie Pam character is very much inspired by a lot of aunties I have.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I mentioned Charlie Pride a few times in the book.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, so growing up around the Aboriginal community, a lot of Charlie Pride, a lot of old country. So yeah, it's all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the men's group as well. I was part of a men's group myself as a teenager, like 17, 18. So yeah, it was it's all very sort of inspired by people and things I've done, but yeah, no one's named after anyone. I actually had to change the name of the elder at the men's group, just because I had met another elder who's really respected in Western Sydney who had the same name.
Right.
So I thought I should probably change it.
Change that,
just because.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
And interesting for Thomas, I guess, because he hasn't connected with his elders and with his own people from the city. He's got kind of sidetracked by hanging out with the wrong mob, as it describes in the book. Do you find that in the city that it's less easy to stay connected to men's group elders, or have you been able to reconnect there once you've moved down?
Yes and no. So Thomas is definitely inspired by a few young people I've met through my professional life. I did an Aboriginal camp, youth camp for work, and one of the nights we had an elder come out and do a cultural night with them. But the biggest takeaway I had from that night was that most of the kids just aren't connected to their culture. Most of their families had come from other places and settled in Sydney for years, but they don't know what country they come from, or what their totem is, anything like that. So there's definitely that sort of disconnect that I've seen in the young people of Western Sydney today. But yeah, there's a lot of organisations and services out in the world now that are improving on that slowly, one step at a time. So yeah, I am hopeful that it will get better, but it's definitely something I've come across through my working life.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think, I guess we could put it down to poverty or just a general rush of the city and, I guess the stereotypes for Western Sydney. But yeah, I am hopeful that those connections will come back and hopefully be stronger than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me, what books are you reading, or what books have you kind of read that you think have influenced the way you write?
I read this book. It was called The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian.
Okay.
The author's name is escaping me right now. Basically, it's about it's a true story about a Native American boy growing up on a reservation in America.
Yep.
But yeah, that really struck a chord with me because it was very real and honest. But it was also extremely funny. It was very focused on relationships and culture and what that experience is like growing up. So that's something I sort of tried to emulate myself with this book is that sense of community and just that authenticity of the character. I read that a long time ago and it's always stuck with me. It's one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
And also growing up, I read a lot of Paul Jennings, so I just love the way his characters jumped off the page. I loved his writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all he just knew how kids felt, and
yes, yeah.
So yeah, I've definitely always kept that, and also Andy Griffiths. I loved Andy Griffiths books growing up, so I've definitely his stories are always the funniest. I can't even describe how much I love them. But yeah, so I think I take a lot of that humor myself.
Yeah.
Onto myself, and I try to put as much of that as I can into the writing. Because yeah, that's the thing I loved was that the stories were funny, and while they were also, very authentic in the way they portrayed children, they were just hilarious, and they were very easy to read because so much was happening as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the sort of books I read, and yeah, also like the Goosebumps books, and yeah, those are a big part of my childhood as well.
Yeah. Sounds like you're very much of an age of some of my kids. So we've got, lines of Goosebumps and, there was R.L. Stein, wasn't it, that wrote that, and all the Andy Griffiths ones. And yeah, all of those for sure. Probably a good thing. We'd like a few more horror writers and those kind of things out there. That would be good.
Yes. I love horror.
Yeah. You love horror, did you say?
Yeah, I do love horror.
Yeah. Are you going to write some horror?
Look, I don't know that I'm any good at it. I've tried.
Yeah.
Look, we'll see what happens. Yeah, I have tried and failed, but maybe one day the right story comes along and
the idea
and I succeed. But
yeah,
it's definitely something on my horizon. I definitely love to write horror.
Yeah, it's Stephen King's The Stand has just started on one of the streaming services at the moment, and so moving into kind of film, and given that you've got a bit of a film connection. Is the Boy from the Mish going to be, can we see it on Netflix anytime soon?
Look, nothing's happening at the moment, but that would be really great.
Wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and a lot of teens these days don't read actually, so.
No, that's it. So they're far more likely to watch Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah, and like through high school, I remember I would only really start reading a book if I saw it was a film. So I'd see.
So you could get a very easy one.
Yeah, like what's an example? I'm not sure, but you see a movie that's based on books, it makes you want to read it.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how I got back into reading was, through that. But yeah, that would be really exciting. There's nothing happening at the moment, but yeah, that would be great to see. And I think we need more movies and TV shows about Aboriginal teens, about Aboriginal people, and because there's not enough representation in the film or TV world as well.
Yep.
Or you get a movie that's very, very heavy on culture and message, and very didactic. But then you get stuff like Mystery Road or Redfern Now that just show people being people, and those are the things I think that are the best stuff. But nothing happening right now.
Well,
but yeah, that'd be really great to see.
Yeah. So what I really enjoyed about the book particularly is that, I really love the relationships. Yeah. So it was there's a bit of education about culture. There was the growing up and that almost painful first love. Jackson, I just felt for him, because he, regardless that he was, working his way through his sexuality, but the growing up, full of hormones and, slamming the doors, and then he's got the little brothers and he's got all the cousins to mind. It's like, I just really felt for him, but enjoyed the really slow reveal of his tentative forays into conversations with Thomas. And then at times Thomas felt a bit more confident about where he was, but then not so much. And, I guess that's any first love, but was that your experience? Have you had your first love? Do we get into those kind of conversations? Is that something you want to share? Maybe not. Let's just keep it in the theoretical. But I really enjoyed the way that slow opening up of his relationship and his understanding of what he wanted was, beautifully done.
Yeah. I will say that, my own sort of journey to self-acceptance, or whatever you call it, was very similar. Like, it was a really slow kind of, over the course of years, slowly picking away at myself and becoming more confident in who I was and my identity. So yeah, it was, I was in my early 20s when I first started telling people that I was gay. So yeah, it took a long time. So I really wanted to sort of, while the story does take place over a short period of time, just to portray that sort of hesitance and growth that you go through if it does take you a while to come to terms with. But yeah, I don't consider myself a romantic person at all. But
no, okay. Well, you've done the romance really well.
But yeah, when I was writing the book, I was I was right there. I was butterflies and that warm feeling, and it was all there, and it was all very much accessible for me when I was writing it. And so yeah, I guess maybe I am a bit of a romantic at heart, but yeah, I never thought of myself that way.
Yeah, especially if you're like, but hey, here you go.
Yeah.
The other thing I really loved was Callan and Jani's reactions when, I found out, got told, I won't ruin it in the story, but, I thought, how are they going to react, and it was so beautiful that it was hopeful. The story was hopeful. It was, it was still challenging. It was still emotional, but they were there for him.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, that was the sort of experience that I've had, terrified until I hear that it's okay.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was, and writing for teenagers, the target audience, are those kids who might be struggling or, not fully ready to live as they are. So, I wanted to be hopeful. It was really important to me to, have a hopeful ending, and, that shows that there can be that supportive aftermath. And so that was really important to me, that the friends would, be accepting, and it's not a problem. It's not a thing. But so that was really important to me, especially writing YA. I think teens who read the book will be hopeful, I think. So yeah, that was a very important thing for me to do when writing those relationships and those reveals, and I guess those coming out moments. It's very much inspired by my own reactions that I've had when I've confided in someone. While I've had a couple sort of not so great reactions, I've mostly had such great reactions, and no one's cut me out of their lives yet, so that's good.
Haven't ditched you, that's good.
But I've had that positive experience, so I really wanted to capture that in that book to make it hopeful and make it happy, and it's not a terrifying thing to come to be accepting of yourself. It's the greatest thing you could ever do. It's I just wanted to capture that in the writing.
Yeah, and I think you've done it beautifully. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. So, actually, who inspired the book cover? Did you have much sort of input into that?
I had My impression was that, just from my own little research, that I wouldn't have any say in the cover or anything. But
Okay.
basically, I did have quite a little bit. I was always asked for my opinion or
Mm-hmm.
what I thought of this or that, and the cover artwork was the idea from my publisher, was to have a picture of both the boys on the front.
Yep.
But it was done by an Aboriginal artist named Halfleg.
Right.
I think he's from the Northern Territory.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it was important also to have an Aboriginal artist do that
Yeah.
artwork, and I'm thrilled with it. I had no
Yeah.
image in my head of what the cover was going to be. I think that's definitely not what something that I can appropriately give feedback on, because I have no idea what I wanted for the cover. But
Yep. But you're happy with it
I
as
love
is.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the the comfort and the smile on their faces.
Yeah.
I think it's very meaningful in terms of how the reader will feel as they read it and at the end. And I'm really happy with how that turned out.
Yeah. I kept going back every now and again, just having a look, and I'm going, yeah, that's totally Jackson. Yeah, look at him. So no, it's good. Okay. So
Yeah.
so what happens now? So you've got have you just got the one book deal with Alan and Unwin, or have you are you contracted to do more? What happens now?
Yeah, it was just a one book deal. Like, they just have the option on my next work, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm just wrapping up working on another YA novel right now.
Are you allowed to share a
Yeah,
little bit about that, or are you?
yeah, sure, I can. So yeah, you mentioned in my intro that I got that copyright agency First Nations fellowship.
Yep.
So I took that in November last year. So that was at Varuna Writers House, and yeah, I really got to find a second wind on this novel at that fellowship.
Fantastic.
Yeah, basically it's sort of inspired by the kids I've met working in the youth justice system and the out of home care system here in Western Sydney, and yeah, it's just sort of another YA story, just about a Aboriginal kid getting in trouble. So hopefully it's good. I'm not sure. But yeah, so I'm pretty close to finishing, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll submit that to my publisher when I'm ready, and hopefully they like it.
Yeah, see what they think. Very good.
Yeah.
So apart then from being able to go to the Varuna, that's fantastic. What's your kind of writing process now? Are you back at work? Are you doing some part-time work, or are you just writing full-time?
I've actually just quit my job.
Okay.
It's not related to the writing.
Not related. No.
I just
Okay.
yeah. It's probably best I don't talk about.
All right. Let's
basically,
move on.
just ready for a change.
Yep.
In the work. So I'm just taking February off to promote this book, and yeah, so working on a bit of writing here and there, and I'm trying not to rush myself with this novel, and but yeah, just writing, and so yeah, I've got a bit of time off now just to put more energy into the promotion, and also to get back to work on the book. So yeah, don't really know what the near future holds, but hopefully a change in terms of work, and yeah, I guess I'll just see what comes.
See what comes. Yeah, lots of opportunity, and hopefully with the economy now in a bit of a growth phase with the pandemic, dare we say it, under control in Australia, that might what day is it? Let's have a look at what's happening. But yeah, so tell me, a few people love to get this question, which is, if you have an audiobook, who would you love to read your work? Do you have somebody in mind? If they say, yeah, we're going to do the audiobook, who would you have?
Well, we do have an audiobook.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm allowed to say who's doing it.
Okay, that's all right. Don't say that.
Yeah, that'll be out soon. So yeah, I'm really happy with the choice that they went for. I'm already a big fan of them. So yeah, it's hard for me to hear other people reading the book. It turns out. So I get that cringy feeling, like if I'm watching I was the same at the film school I went to. If I had to, act in a short film, or play as an extra or something, I just hated seeing myself, which I think is the same with
it's
hearing
pretty
other
human.
people write my book. Yeah, but I'm really excited at hearing the audiobook, and
Yep.
I'm really happy with the casting choice that they've gone
Excellent.
for. So, but yeah, keep your eyes open or your
Yeah.
ears open.
Ears open, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there is an audiobook in the works, and it'll be out soon.
Beautiful. All right. So we're coming to the end of our time. Is there anything else in particular that you'd love to tell people about your story? Is there any, who do you want to read it, or where do you want it to go from here?
Yeah, I just want to, hopefully get it into the hands of Aboriginal teens and, their parents and their families. I think a lot of adults can relate to this story as well. So, I don't want to say it's only for teens, but just anyone who has ever felt like they didn't belong, or that their self-identity wasn't really valid, or felt ashamed of themselves for whatever reason. Yeah, just hopefully gets in the hands of those readers, and but ultimately, I'm wanting to reach those teens, those gay Aboriginal teens, or queer Aboriginal teens, however they identify, who might be struggling, or might just need a bit more time. I think that's the most important thing I needed, was just time to come to terms with it, and get to that stage where I was happy with myself and who I was, and now I'm more confident, and life has gotten a lot better. So I just want to hopefully reach those readers and show them that they're not alone, and they do have a voice, and their stories are important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Gary. Where can people find your book? So where do they go at the moment? This interview will probably be out after the launch, which is the 2nd of February. Is that right?
Yep.
First or 2nd of February. So where can people find your book? Where's the best place?
Best place to get the book is from Booktopia. I'll be signing a bunch of copies, and they'll be selling a bunch of signed copies. So get in early, and hopefully you'll get a signed copy.
Yep. Then we'll be able to sell it when you're famous, and you've got a whole string of books and movies. Fantastic.
Well, once I'm dead, those signed copies will become really valuable.
Very good. All right, now social media. Where else can people find you on social media? Where's your connections?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So I've got an author page on Facebook, and I've got the Twitter and Instagram. But yeah, I've also got my website, GaryLonesborough.com. So everything's on there anyway. Writing the occasional blog, so I'll post that up on my website when I do them. But yeah, otherwise I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Okay.
I'm not ready for TikTok yet. I'm not ready for that. But maybe one day.
Maybe one day. Yes. Yeah, maybe one day. Very good. All right. Gary, it has been fantastic chatting with you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry we went off to a slightly weird start. That is all we've got time for today. And just like to say thank you for listening to Australian Book Lovers. We hope you enjoyed hearing from Gary Lonesborough about The Boy from the Mish, which is out in the beginning of February, the 2nd of February. So it's definitely a great read and covers a whole lot of things: own voices, First Nations Australians coming out, racism, Indigenous LGBTQI+, and Love Oz YA. So if you enjoyed this chat that we had, please leave us a review on iTunes. And if you want to hear more about Australian Book Lovers, it is at australianbooklovers.com.
Thank you so much, Gary, and thank you, Veronica, for what was an amazing interview. And thank you, Gary, for being our very first interview for the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Now, next episode, I understand we've got author Kate Allen, who's going to be on the show. So very much looking forward to that. But when it comes to authors and books, if you yourself are a writer and would like to be a part of the podcast, as well as Australian Book Lovers, by all means, please do visit our website and follow the author submission form, where you'll be able to upload your book, and we can pop it as a listing and then send in your details, and we'll be more than happy to arrange a time to join us on the Australian Book Lovers podcast.
And thank you to Bobby for reminding us to say that a basic listing is free. So that's your cover, your blurb, an author bio, and the bio link of your choice. So one bio link per book, and that is free for people to get there. We will have so many Australian books that you can have a bit of a look at.
Yes, well, the goal is to become the premier location in Australia for Australian authors. So help us grow. Please help us become that premier destination for book lovers and for authors. So please, and if you are a book lover, jump on to the website and subscribe to be an official book lover so that you can be a part of the newsletter and find out all the latest information, latest listings and news and events that will be coming up, because we've only just started. It's very early days, and we've got so many fantastic, I guess, events and opportunities that we're going to be introducing. Yeah. So the sky's the limit. This is our very first podcast. So as you can tell, a little bit tongue twisted, but that'll get better as well. So for everyone out there cringing, you're not cringing as hard as I am.
And giveaways is the other thing. We had a fantastic response to our launch giveaway, and the first prize winner got a Kindle Paperwhite, and she got to choose 3 books from the ABL platform, which is fantastic. So the other thing that you can do if you want to support Australian book lovers is to like us or on iTunes, and you'll find this and future episodes on the website, iTunes and other podcast platforms. And we would just love you to read more Aussie books. So find out more. We're online, Twitter at Australian Books, because unfortunately Twitter doesn't let you have Australian book lovers. It's too long. Facebook at Australian Book Lovers, and Instagram at Australian Book Lovers. So go on over, interact, give us some ticks. Tell us what you'd like us to talk about on the podcast, whether you're a reader or a writer, and we would love to chase up and see what we can do for you.
And any thoughts on this very first podcast, be gentle, because it's definitely a new experience for me. But it is really, truly exciting that we are in the position to record our very first podcast. This has been a huge undertaking, and it's just such a special feeling to be here now. I can promise you, dear listeners out there, I'll get a little bit better at this podcast stuff. But
I think you've done fine, Darren. I don't think you need to be worried about it. And it's lovely to hear Australian voices, and that's what some of my favourite podcasts are just Australian voices yabbering about stuff. So that's what we'll do, is talk about reading, talk about writing.
And maybe talk about how one says the word dent, because I understand it's said a little bit differently in Melbourne.
How you say what?
Dent. I always thought they called it dint.
Oh, I didn't know. It's definitely a dent.
Definitely a dent.
It's interesting how different things are between states, because when you and I were writing a book and you mentioned something about the power poles in South Australia are called something completely different, and I had to look up and say, what the hell is he talking about? So
God,
even though
Stobie poles.
Yes, that's exactly right. So South Australians, you can, throw your hands up in horror that I didn't know that.
Yes. Well, again, thank you to everybody for joining us for our very first podcast. Now, we're going to finish the show today with a couple of book reviews, which you've been so kind as to prepare for us, Veronica. Can you perhaps let us know what books you're going to be reviewing for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one is, unsurprisingly, a review of Gary Lonesborough's book, The Boy from the Mish.
Excellent. And
the second one is short and sweet, but it is just a lovely book by one of our authors, Hayley Walsh, called Making March. And given that it's just been released also in February, and it's about a woman making her way through the month of February until she gets to March, it's a kind of perfect timing for her to get out there. And it is hilarious and very, very good. So yes, you'll hear that as well.
Excellent. Well, I think it's time to get ready, have a listen to these book reviews, but maybe first of all, thank you to everybody for joining us. Wishing you all the very best. Now we're going to have to get our tagline finish here rolling perfectly, Veronica. Yeah. So how should we try? A nice staying alive pace, or
maybe a little bit quicker than staying alive.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, our finishing tagline, take 1. Here we go. And remember, read more Aussie books. I think that went pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Bye for now. In The Boy from the Mish, debut author Gary Lonesborough navigates us beautifully through a painful, angst-ridden and fraught first love for the main protagonist, Jackson. The author's style is crisp and spare. He paints the Australian coastal community with a deft touch, leaving the reader to see, smell and hear the familiar world of the Aussie Christmas holiday for themselves. The characters are well written. You can feel the roller coaster ride of Jackson's emotions and hormones as he finds his way through sharing his greatest secret in a slow and sensitive reveal. As a gay Indigenous teenager, he experiences his fair share of discrimination. But what I really enjoyed about The Boy from the Mish was the hope the story is threaded with, from interactions with family, friends, his community, and random Christmas campers. So while there are tough times ahead